Hello and welcome to the first episode of the new No One Likes Us Talking monthly podcast. For this first episode of the monthly pod, I'll be joined by ex-Millwall player and Millwall legend Phil Coleman, and also joining us is Henry Morgan from the No One Likes Us Talking weekly podcast. This pod is going to be very different to the weekly pods, where we'll be one main subject each week and a quick roundup of the month at the start. Today we'll be discussing the transfers and the main subject being what do we see as a successful Millwall season. But before we start, I just want to have a quick introduction to the monthly podcast team. I'll start with myself. I'm Gary Staff. I've supported Millwall for 41 years now. Man and boy, I started going down the den with my granddad when I used to pester him when he lived just off the back of the Blue, and he'd take me down, pop me over the turnstiles, and I do believe the first team I ever saw contained Phil Coleman, one of our main guests in the podcast this season. I then obviously saw Millwall go up in 88, etc. And it's just been a roller coaster. And we'll go on to talk about it a little bit later on. But I've seen Millwall through thick and thin. I've seen them in the first division. I've seen them down in the lower echelons of the third division as well. But I love Millwall to bits. I currently sit in block 15 with my dad and a lot of colleagues around me and friends around me. And there's too many to mention, but they know where they are if they're listening tonight. So, without further ado, I'll hand over to Mr. Coleman himself to introduce himself and give a little bit of history of how he's here today.
Hi, Gary. Hi, Henry, and everyone listening.
Thank you, Phil.
I was a fan on the terraces at the Old Den from about the age of 13, 1973. Watching the likes of Alan Dorney, Barry Kitchener, Harry Cripps, ingrained in my brain. The first time I walked up the steps and looked at the pitch from the back of the Cold Blow Lane and saw Big Kitch, and I want to be one of them. So signed schoolboy films in 1975, signed as an apprentice in 77 straight from school, and played in the team that won the FA Youth Cup in 79. Can't think who scored in the final. I'll leave that one to the fans. I left under a cloud because Peter Anderson sold me, and I just signed a 4-year contract. I had no intentions of leaving my club. Yeah, it was my club, not Peter Anderson's. And lucky enough, I came back. I had a short spell playing in the reserves under George Graham, but then I come back under John Doherty, and he signed me on a 2-year contract in 86, 88. So I was a part of the squad that got promoted. Injuries curtailed me playing much in there, but then I doubt if I'd have got in that team anyway, given the quality of the lads. But I did play about 10 or 15 games with my brother Nick in the 86-87 season. And I'm still down the Den. All my family go down there, and we've got the tradition. We meet up, pie and mash, watch the game, have a beer. We catch up with fans and supporters. Other good people that I've grown up with since joining the club in the early 70s. I thoroughly enjoy my day out, win or lose. So that's my history. Thanks, guys.
And yourself, Mr. Henry?
Gaz, cheers. Evening, Phil. Well, my dad took me to a first game when I was about 8 years old at the Old Den. Last season at the Old Den, I'm slightly younger than you, Gaz, where... yeah, that's it, mate. Turning 40 this coming year. But yeah, so, only got one season at the Old Den. I believe I saw John McGinley's last ever goal for Millwall in a 2-1 victory against Swindon Town in something like 1992. It must be 92. Last season at the Old Den that my dad took me to. It being one of his first ever games, my dad wasn't really ever into football or anything like that growing up. He lived up on a farm in Bedfordshire and was originally from Wales and that. We went and stood in the away end because he did didn't understand where you could go and do. So I took the Swindon away in my first ever game, and I've just cracked on ever since then, to be honest. But no, gone with a number of different groups. We used to drink in the Barnaby before it was knocked down and turned into some flats / social housing of some kind. It's SIT Block 42, season ticket holder down there, with a few people that we were going to for years, basically. And I'd have to say, probably to sort of date myself, my favourite player as a youngster growing up was Alex Ray, who I loved. Hard tackling, goal scoring, all action midfielder in a true Millwall mould. Slightly reminds me slightly of some of the stuff that I've watched with Terry Hurlock, obviously, but a Scotch version of him. And been going. What I think I worked out, something like 32 years, something like that. And unfortunately, never got the pleasure of seeing Phil Coleman play because my dad was late on the Millwall scene. Gutted.
Cheers for that. Cheers for that, Henry. So we will also be joined by the great Kai Bennett from that Millwall podcast. He will pop up every now and then through the monthly pods with his amazing input.
Hi, Bethany Warren here. Millwall Lionesses have partnered with international smartphone application Be My Eyes. Be My Eyes is an application that truly benefits the poor of sight and the blind, but is supported by those of us that can see.
You might wonder how blind people deal with everyday challenges. Well, normally the answer is simple. We're not that different from you. We play music. We go to school. We go to work. You get the picture. But sometimes the simplest things can be difficult, and we need a pair of eyes.
Connect to
first available number.
That's where you come in.
establishing video connection.
Through your smartphone, Be My Eyes connects the blind with sighted people through a live video connection. Simply choose if you need help or want to help by the click of a button.
That's a nice picture of you and your family, Caroline. Is it for a present? Yes, it's a photo from my parents.
You can help just by installing the Be My Eyes app.
Prepped image.
And we'll notify you when someone needs your help. And if you're in the middle of something, don't worry. Someone else will step in. So, would you care to be my eyes?
Download the app onto your smartphone now and help those that need your eyes straight away.
Right, welcome back, gents. Where do we start? 2 points from 4. Where do we think's been going wrong so far this season? We had a bit of a chat off air, so I want to bring that out into the open today, guys. Phil, what do you think? I know you've been expressing your views on internet, but obviously saying the right things rather than sometimes saying what you honestly want to feel with some of the comments out there. But what do you feel?
I'm always half full. I'm always positive. I was one of those players where you're losing 5-0 with a minute to go and I could still think we'd win the game. So that's my starting point. I think Gary Rowett signed a few players, 11th last year, been in the league a few years now, and the expectations start to ramp up with a few fans. But you've also got to take a pinch of salt and look at the realities of this league. It's tough. Every single game, every single player, the whole team has to be 100% or you get beat. And I looked at the QPR game. We're leading there. Give away what to me was a poor goal. You let the guy travels miles and bangs it in from. Yeah. That's a poor goal. Blackburn, you played well. You're winning. It looks good, and then you ship a goal. So a couple of poor goals, and you got 6 points, and we wouldn't be having this discussion.
Indeed.
Fulham dictated for large periods of the game. You could see the quality. You've got to be blind not to see their quality. But that's what money gets you. It gets you Mitrovic and it gets you these talented players that can absolutely dictate and boss you around. Some fans were moaning about we didn't get tight. Sometimes you can't get tight on quality players. Talk to some of the guys that I played with. Certainly I can think of 3 from the 1988 team. They tried to kick Glenn Hoddle and couldn't get anywhere near him in both games. you just can't get near to some of these talented players. They're too good.
Well,
So whilst you want to put a shift in,
Yeah.
the typical Millwall way, you want to lump him. Sometimes you just can't get near them. They shift the ball so quickly. But then I look at it, there's the last 10 minutes, there's a chance to equalise against Fulham.
If Phil, to be honest with you, that reminds me of something that Robbie Ryan said about Cristiano Ronaldo. He was like, from the FA Cup final, he said when he was interviewed afterwards, he was like, well, I tried to kick him up in the air, but I couldn't get anywhere near him. So it's similar with what you're saying. Yeah, I hear you.
I was at Colchester United and we played Newcastle, and Chris Waddle was on the wing. The whole team couldn't get near him. I think there was everyone was chasing the bloke. It's impossible. They're just too good. They're too quick. They see things half hour before you come anywhere near them. They move the ball so quickly. But at the end of the day, there was a bit of guts coming back in the team because the last 10 minutes. And then I looked at Cardiff and their set pieces. Well, last season we were brilliant at defending. I think someone sent me a message. We're the best defensive record in Europe at one stage. We're keeping clean sheets. Bartowski's keeping 17 clean sheets. He's the second best in the league. But what teams do, they sit back at the end of the year, they look at teams like Millwall, they spend an awful lot of money, they invest in analysts, scouts, they take it back on a computer, they've got kits, Prozone, whatever they've got. They spend hours on the training ground working out how to beat Millwall. What's Millwall's strengths? How are we going to defend against them? There's a couple of hours on the training ground. What's Millwall's weaknesses? How can we score? It's no coincidence that I've known for a while that a couple of our centre-backs don't move their feet quick enough in the box. Well, there's been a Blackburn goal and there was a goal for Cambridge last night. Murray Wallace got done for pace last night and he glanced it in. I think Jake Cooper got done for pace and he's glanced it in for Blackburn. You know, these guys are now nicking across our defenders. It's been whipped in near post. There's a couple of goals. So have clubs worked out that they can actually score with a bit of quality and a bit of movement in the box against us? Because this is what teams are doing. They've got the money. This is the Championship. It's not League One. It's definitely not League Two. It's a tough standard of football. It's a high standard of football for me.
Phil, that goal last night as well, if you look at where he come from, he was at the back of about 6 players and he just walked all the way, well, didn't walk, he ran around the outside of everyone and literally no one went with him. You just see about four or five players all marking their men and all of a sudden, hold on a minute, he's completely free on the penalty spot. So
if you take it back, Gary, everybody was tight on the edge of the box.
Yeah.
Yes.
The guy that scored went to the right of a pod of 6 players, and Murray Wallace went to the left, and he was 2 or 3 yards short for pace getting to that ball at the near post. Yeah. So, and I've also seen some of the other goals where they're working block-offs, if you know what I mean. That there are players designated to hit a Millwall defender to let him have a clear run.
Yeah.
You know, we're doing it. Listen, I think last year we scored most goals from set pieces of anybody in the league. You know, we're right up there in those stats. So we're doing it to the opposition, and funnily enough, the opposition are now doing it to us. But if you are going to let a bloke go free, you've got to be quick enough to get with him and at least challenge him. Murray was miles behind last night, and he knew his reaction after the goal. He sort of like threw his fist to his shorts, and he knew he'd let the fella get across him and away. So
he certainly made up for it, though, Phil, didn't he, mate?
That's also something I'm seeing because there's a mental toughness about most of those players, and I think is it Neil Harris? Is it Gary Rowett? They both seem to have signed players that are not intimidated by the den. They're not intimidated by the standard of the football or the league. They can win games and they can defend for long periods, and they will get a 0-0 draw. And it might be boring, but it's the Championship. But if we get a goal, we'll win 1-0. And I seem to remember one of the world's greatest managers, Brian Clough, seemed to do that. If we get one chance, we win 1-0. Well, it was all right back in the 70s for Brian Clough to win European titles, but for some Millwall fans, we got to win 6-0 every home game. You know.
Well, hold on a minute. Didn't George Graham and the Arsenal team in the 80s, 90s just it was all 1-0 with their arms in the air, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, you have coaches have philosophies, managers have philosophies, but if you can get it tight at the back, you've got a chance of not losing. If you can then be a bit creative in midfield, and everyone wants a £100 million centre forward that gets you 30 goals a year, but who's got £100 million? There's very few clubs. But I just look at the club and I see the mental toughness of a Murray Wallace. You know, he's come back last night and nothing fazed him.
Have you heard of the Lions Food Hub? It is now located in the Millwall Community Trust car park. That's beside Millwall's Den in Ballina Road. That Millwall Lioness, Kelly Webster, is involved. Don't forget to help the Lions Food Hub if you can. Thank you.
Welcome back. Well, thanks for that intro. We'll just have a quick 10-15 minute chat now about summer activity. Transfer market's still open as we're speaking. We've already signed George Long, Benik Afobe, George Saville, Daniel Ballard on loan, Scott Malone and Mason Bennett. Matt Smith and Alex Pearce extending their stays. And this week, Alex Mitchell, I believe, has signed a new long-term contract as well. So that's great news. Well done, Alex. And I have to say, it's good business. But as I say, the transfer window's still open. We are, as I say, Mason Bennett is still out. And we are still lacking that, for want of a better way of putting it, that 20 goal a season striker, which I know we can't afford. But are we looking to get that player in? The door is slowly closing on us. Will we get there? What do you think, guys?
Shall I kick off? I think it's brilliant that you get your most of your business done early. I mentioned in the first part that players come in, they've got to settle down the new home, the new way of working, the new training ground, getting used to the den with fans. So the earlier you do your business, the better. You get used to all those types of things. And I actually think that if you went back 2 or 3 seasons, we're in the Championship, just one at Wembley, and they're coming in, I'm thinking, how many of this squad are actually Championship quality players? And I'm looking at the squad and thinking, perhaps there's 15, and there's some kids coming through. Now I'm seeing 24, 25 that you trust to put them in the first team. You know, Long has proved himself in one game to be a good goalkeeper. You've got an abundance of centre-backs. You've also got players that can play in more than one position.
Yep.
You know, you've got some really talented kids coming through. And that's probably where I was talking about this 3-year plan. You don't put the kids for 3 years. You sign them at 18. You train with the first team. You play. You go out on loan. That's 2 years. You might bring them in and play them 10 games in the first year. You drop them out every 2 or 3 games in the 4th year, in the 5th year. These kids need to come through. And I think there's probably good business done. Championship standard players, times 24. Some really talented kids that still got to prove themselves. You know, they're coming back off loan from Hartlepool and Sutton and these places. And they've got to prove themselves in the Championship, which is Hartlepool to the Championship against Fulham is a step up. Playing for Sutton in the National League and coming and playing for Millwall and West Brom is a step up. Can they do it? Well, let the manager bring him in, let them have a look, try them. But there's a good quality. It looks like they're proven Championship standard. Mason Bennett, as you said, is a little bit of magic. Benik Afobe has shown some lovely touches. Smith can win a header against anybody in the division. So these guys are what I would call proven Championship standard players. Some can play more than one position. That helps your budget because, you know, if you can play centre back and centre midfield player, injuries and suspensions come looming later in the year perhaps. The one thing everybody's after is that striker. But on the other hand, if you've got 5 players that can all score 10 goals, if Smith scores a few, if Bennett scores a few, if Jed scores a few, if Jules Saville scores a few, you're in the top half of the league. And you haven't spent... I'll go back a few years. Wolves were in our division. And Wolves were sitting there quite tasty. And they spent 35 million quid in the transfer window in January on 2 players and absolutely pissed the league. I can't see Millwall spending 35 million at Christmas to win the league. So what do? You go about it by perhaps nicking £1 million player here, but then there's a risk. Does he come off? Does he fit what you're trying to do? But if you can create options and scoring positions, as I said, with Jed, with Smithy, with Bennett, with Mason Bennett, if they all chip in with goals and you're keeping clean sheets like you did for the vast majority of last year, you got a chance of being in the top half. So yeah, I think it's been good business. Everyone wants that striker, but there might be other ways of doing it. It looks like there's some potential to score goals from all over the park. But again, that's linking everybody up and everybody being on the same wavelength and the coaching working on the training ground. But no, it looks a strong, talented squad.
As you mentioned Smith there, Phil, there was a certain amount of headers last night, and Matt Smith won 44% of the headers that were up for heading last night. 44% of all the headers won by Millwall. That's ridiculous.
Well, he's a big lad. He's great in the air. It is obviously I keep talking about strengths and weaknesses. That's his strength. He's only got to win one with Jed Wallace running onto the knockdown. It's a goal.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, but everybody needs to know that we've got to give him a service. Bennett will need a different service. Mason Bennett might need a different service. You know, If you're playing Bradshaw, he's a bit more of a runner in behind. It's another different service.
Agreed.
So it's this gelling together. Who's on the pitch at the time? And for some players, it was easy for me as a fullback or a defender. I just headed it out and booted it and booted the opposition. Now, you've got to give it to a winger where he wants it. You've got to pick Smith on the far post with a decent ball.
Yep.
You might have Jed running in behind. You might have a wing back coming forward. The game's a lot more skillful and a bit more tactical than before. But it's just players on a wavelength, players on an understanding, and then playing to those strengths. And it's also a game because the opposition, that they look at your team sheet at 2:00 and they see Smithy playing up front, and they just, hey, centre half, put your crash helmets on. You got one coming today, So you're trying to outthink the opposition. You're trying to create goals on the training ground. You're working on set pieces. But I just look at the squad, and I think it on no games won on paper, but on paper it looks a good Championship standard squad.
Yeah,
it does, and that's probably why a lot of the pundits out there and the likes of Benjamin Bloom's out there, they put us in the top 6 this season. And I was reading on the 72 podcast today, and they were saying, it could be a dismal season. But what you just said there is, Phil, is absolutely right. We have got a very, very... I know it sounds strange, but I looked at the squad when I was watching us against Blackburn. I thought that looked a team of men out there rather than a team of... Okay, Fulham was very different. I felt like we were trying to pace him, fight the game, fight to get back in the game, and it was more of a fighting team. But when I saw us against Blackburn, I thought we looked a good, solid Championship side. Like I just watched the West Bromwich Albion game and stuff like that the other night, and they were all good, solid Championship players, and they've all got that arrogance about them. Henry was saying, I'm not a big fan of West Bromwich Albion because of the arrogance in the team, but maybe that's what Millwall need as well, a little bit of arrogance. Maybe to give that...
Yeah.
There's a difference between arrogance and confidence. When you've got a confident squad and a confident player, nothing phases them. You can be losing and they'll still be... You live on experience in this game, and I looked at the summer of 86, 87, and we had a team and we were halfway up the old Division 2. John Dock brings in Frank McClintock. Wow. Everyone just went, wow. He then brings in Cash. He then brings in Kevin O'Callaghan. He brings in Steve Wood. He brings in George Lawrence. And I can tell you now, every player in the change room that had been in the 86-87 season was looking around going, shit, I ain't going to play this year. But what you then do is, and this is where I'm always half full and positive, do you know what? I'll roll my sleeves up. I'll get in this side. I'll beat you up the hills in Greenwich Park. I'll nail you in training. I'll do more. And all of a sudden, you had 24 players in the 87-88 season, and everybody could have played in that team, and there was competition for places. Now, if this squad has got the same mental capacity as Keith Stevens, Phil Coleman, Alan Walker, if you get left out for a game, you're knocking on the manager's door. What do I need to do to get back in the team? Train harder. Right, well, I'll train doubly harder. If there's competition for places. And that drives up work rate, that drives up standards, that drives up performances. Never will you have a player sitting on his laurel saying, well, Rowett picks me every week, I might as well just go through the motions here. The minute you get that with one player, it goes through like the flu. You end up with this malaise of people just saying, well, he's never going to drop me, I don't really have to put it in today. I don't see that at the moment. I think there's a strong squad. I think there's competition for places, and if they've all got the same positive and the right attitude, they'll push each other on. And there you have to trust the manager and his scouting to say, I've got these mentally tough players that I can leave Matt Smith on the bench for 5 games and he comes on and he'll do me a right good job. But if Bennick's not playing, I'm going to drop him because I've got Matt Smith and I trust him. So there's that relationship between the manager and the coach. Some managers got that man management where they can look after this squad of 24, 25. Some will only pick the same players if they're fit every week. I think if you're playing well, you deserve to stay in the side. So there's a competition for places as well.
Funny you say that, Phil. I noticed at the weekend Burnley played a 1-11, and it was the first time it had been done. And I think that was the way that he's just trying to change the rule book. Old Sean Dyche at the moment, he's played a 1-11. It's the first time for 23 years, I think.
Yeah, wow.
A team had played 1-11.
Wow,
it's crazy, ridiculous. And to be honest, I always always known it as 1-11, Phil. But it's just people think, and it's a strange thing to say, but the football started when the Premier League started. No, it didn't. There was a much better world of football before. And I'll ask you now, Phil, I was going to say, when you're listening to you talk about when they signed the likes of George Lawrence and Cass and stuff like that, how good did it feel playing with players of those confidence? Well, what was the confidence through the team like? I tell you about the arrogance. What was the confidence in the team like back then in that promotion team?
There were 24 lads, and I drive in from Colchester to Dartford to the training ground for 2 years. I couldn't wait to get there. I'd pick Jimmy Carter up. Sometimes I'd pick Brian Orme up, and we drive in together, and there was a real bond. And I've only had it about 3 times. My youth cup winning team, we had a bond. I had it at Colchester United for a spell, and that was down to a manager called Alan Hunter, the old Northern Ireland and Ipswich player. He brought some players in. But that squad in '88, there was a real bond there. There was a real... we demanded off each other, and if you heard some of the stuff that we had a go at each other about, but it was because we cared. It was because we wanted more from each other. And we backed each other up, and we went out together, and we had a beer together. And on the training ground, I just look at Terry Earlock open his body up and ping a pass 50 yards out, daisy cutter across the grass, and I'm thinking, what a good player you are. And then Cass would just jump, hang in the air, and I'm thinking, bloody hell, I wouldn't like to mark you. But then I had to mark him in training, and I had to out-jump him. So they drove you up a standard. So I remember Cantona came in, and he drove everybody up at Manchester United. These guys were coming in faster, fitter, better players. Kevin O'Callaghan, Jimmy Carter, completely 2 different wingers. One was quick off the mark, and one would beat anybody in a phone box. So when you get it, you get it. And when you've got that team spirit, and that's down to a manager, that's down to a good captain, that's down to the players' personality and characters. God, dear me, it was unreal in '88. That was a real band of brothers there. I felt left out because I couldn't get into the first team in the second year. I was in the first team the first year, in and out. I had a wire put in my big toe, so I missed 3 or 4 months of the season. But you couldn't get in the side for love nor money because the boys were doing so well. But I didn't begrudge them. I wasn't moaning about it. I just, wow, get on with it. We're winning. I went away to Leeds. You're beating Leeds away. Do me a favour. Happy days. Yeah. You patted your mates on the back after the game, even though you got a collar and tie on. It's, when you get that, it really is like, I don't know, you just want more of it. It's a joy to train. It's a joy to, I keep moaning about running up the hills in Greenwich Park. It's not enjoyable, but it becomes enjoyable because darn well you're going to win on Saturday.
Exactly. Cool. Henry, did you want to make any more points there, or should we move on to the next subject?
I completely agree with what's been said. To be honest, I don't have anything worthwhile to add. I think the only thing I was going to say is, like, in the States, they often rate like an off-season transfer, and they give it like a grade, like an ABC grade. And I think Gary Rowett's business was sort of like a B plus, until he signed George Savile out of nowhere, and I was like, okay, we're looking at more of a A minus A. Do you know what I mean? Like, just in terms of what I thought was capable of doing in this transfer window, he shored up the defence. He brought in probably the best chance we've got at a striker scoring more than 15 goals in 20 odd years in Benica Phoebe. So yeah, that's all I would add. But yeah,
and on that, just to back you up there, Henry, when you look at people are saying this is a negative, they're too defensive. Okay, when you play perhaps Smith and Afobe up front, and you might bring in Bennett, Mason Bennett on one side and Jed Wallace on the other side, and you got Savile coming from midfield. Are you telling me that's a negative team that can't score goals?
I mean, I don't think so, but
there's 5 players there that can score goals for fun in this league, and you've got players behind that can defend, and a goalkeeper that was the best in the division last year. So there's a threat. People can, these guys. I think look at what Gary Rowett's done and ask yourself why. Why has he got Afobe? Why has he got Jules Savile back in? Why has he got Evans? Why has he got an Arsenal kid, Ballard? I'll tell you why. They've improved the team.
The other thing I was going to say as well, Phil, and you were talking about driving up standards, how good has Cliftonville been in his first few games this season? He has looked like a better version of Ryan Woods than Ryan Woods did last season. I thought he's looked absolutely fantastic and like a completely different player from what he was last year, and maybe that's because Woods was playing in his position. And the other thing I'd say is Evans last night, okay, it's against a mid-table League One side, but actually Cambridge were no mugs. They came and played some nice football. I think Stan from our podcast mentioned that on Twitter and a few social media things. And so maybe, if he can get doing a bit more of that freestyling stuff as well, like you said, those standards are being driven up for players that were here last year and maybe we had question marks about.
Yeah, I don't buy into it's only Cambridge, they've only just been promoted to Division 1. Well, it was the Everton's mindset against it's only Millwall, we turned them over. Yeah. Well, if you drop your standards, Millwall, and Cambridge, you up your game because you're playing a championship side, that's where you get cup defeats, that's where the underdog comes good. Last night, the bits that I saw, Evans was quality. Kifting, he looks like a Rolls Royce at times. He can pass, he can head, he can cover the ground, he breaks the play up.
He likes to tackle.
He loves a tackle. He's that authoritarian in the centre of the park, and he reminds me of a little bit of a more slimline version of Terry Hurlock, because Hurlers could do everything. He could break play up, he could tackle, he got some headers in, he got forward, he got passing. Terry Hurlock was one of the best passers of a ball you'll ever have. And this guy in the centre of the park now, he reminds me a bit like that. He can do just about everything. He looks quality.
Blind,
and I think as well.
Yeah.
He's in his second year. He's in his second.
Yeah.
When you join the club, honestly, trust me, there is that unsettling period where you join the club, you don't know where the office is, you don't even know where the toilet is, you don't know who to turn to, you're living away from home, you might be renting a flat, you've just moved down from wherever. But when you start a second season, you're bedded in, everything's more familiar. You start to go out and enjoy your football. You haven't got worries. It just disappears. And I think he might just be on that cusp at the moment where he just knows what he's doing now. So he looks.
And he also mentioned as well, he plays off the fans as well, and he's that type of player like Hurlock.
Yeah,
he puts in a hard tackle. The crowd get behind him, shouts his name. You know what I mean? And his performance goes up another 10-15%. And the tackle he wouldn't have won, he then wins it because he's got that extra 5 yards in him. Because of that moment,
I hear fans moaning about, he's on 50 grand, he's on 100 grand, he's on 5 grand, he's a professional footballer, it's his job. Tell me about it. Confidence. There is one thing, the top 3 inches in football, in your head, confidence. And when you get a confident player, you get more out of them. Every player goes out there, they want to win the game. No player leaves a tunnel wanting to lose. Every player wants to win. But when you're confident, you go out there and you almost take the pee. You're dismissive of the opposition because you know you're damn good. When the crowd are on your back, when you've lost 3 games on the spin, there's an element of doubt. You're still giving 100%, but you are not that. I don't really want the ball. I'm just watching some of these Millwall players now. They look like they know what they're doing, and they look like they want a ball, and they look like they're enjoying their football, even though it's been 2 draws and 2 defeats. They look like they want to play. So it bodes well for me. But then I'm always positive, so.
Brilliant. Okay, guys. Right, I'll wrap it up, that section there. We take a break.
Remember Carl Bates crashing off his chair at Carrow Road? And the commentaries that he and Max McLennan gave throughout the pandemic? Well, iFollow gives you all that and the inside track on our club, with a range of benefits including live match video streams if you live outside the United Kingdom and Republic of Ireland. Live audio commentary and exclusive club content is available everywhere. Sign up today to get closer to the action. And don't forget, at least 80% of iFollow net revenue goes straight to our club. It's a great way to show your support. A basic package is free and the audio pass starts from $4.49 a month. Go to Millwall's website and select iFollow to subscribe.
Great, I'm back with the No One Likes Us monthly podcast team of Henry Morgan and Phil Coleman. That has been such an insight in the first sections of the show so far. A lot longer than I thought it was going to be, but that's exactly why we've started this podcast up again, and to give a bit more meat on the bones, as we were just discussing. Right, now we're going to move on to today's main section. What contributes a good season? Personally, I've been more than happy with the last couple of seasons, finishing in the top halves and becoming a consolidated championship side. But has the recent successes in the last few years upped the expectation of the fan base? Phil, I'll start with you. We've been to Wembley so many times now, the joke that the green man's ours and stuff like that. Do you think the modern fans, because of the recent successes of Millwall, have grown to expect that a little bit more?
I think there's a percentage of the crowd that will look at the signings in the summer look at what we've done in the last couple of years, just missing out on the playoffs, and then last year was a strange year, but I think it was 11th. And put 2 and 2 together and literally come up with 4 and say we're going to be in the top 6, we're going to playoffs. I think they're sensible enough to know that there are a couple of better teams in this league. We've already named them, Fulham's and West Brom's. There will always be a Barnsley that shock everybody. I would still be down to earth, quite realistic, and say staying in this league is an achievement. And I'll say that because there are far better clubs with better players, bigger wages, bigger crowds, bigger incomes, even bigger backers, and I don't underestimate John Berylson. And I think every single game is a tough game. Every single player has to be on his money, but you have to build slowly within your budget and within the wage structure. And I think that's happened the last 4 years. So, yeah, we are probably beginning to be a solid mid-table side with perhaps an eye on always have ambition, but always be realistic. Because if you start to believe yourself too much, you get kicked where it hurts. And I think we learnt a lesson 3 years ago when we finished just outside relegation. And that was probably a very big learning curve where you do well, you come up, and then all of a sudden you end up back down again. What you don't want to be doing is yo-yoing. And I've said the word consistent. You know, are we consistently a mid-table side? Yes. Well, I would have that because we're looking at Fulham, we're looking at West Brom, we're looking at Nottingham Forest, we're looking at Derby. I personally don't want to be watching Rochdale and Fleetwood and Accrington Stanley if you drop down a division. All right, there's a few big games. You've got your Charltons and Sunderlands and Portsmouth. But, hey, tell some of the Millwall fans about Sunderland. Where are they? You know, and Ipswich. But these Charlton, they give their right arm to be where we are now, debating whether we're going to stay in the league. Well, stay in the Championship, keep building, as I said, within budget and income, keep building a squad. It might be longer than Gary Rowett's 3 years because you've got contracts that are up and I need to get rid of him. I can't bring one in until the wages are freed up. I'm not sure about financial fair play, but I'm sure it plays a part. But staying in this league, building, enjoying the crowds, I mean, I went to Ipswich not last season, the season before. Lovely grounds, you know. It is a far better league. It's an enjoyable league. The games are more enjoyable. It's not like the Premier League. The type of football in the Championship, it's quality, but there's a cut and thrust to it as well. There's an honesty to it. So I quite enjoy the league, but there's that ambition. I suppose the golden fleece is getting into the Premier League, but then for me, you've got to be a bit realistic, and also looking at these young players coming through. So you're trying to bring in players from the academy. So there's a real pot that goes in, and I'll just say it for about the 10th time: staying in this league and building. Listen, if there's a sniff of the playoffs, I'm sure you go for it. And as the players are winning games, the points tally goes up. All of a sudden you start beginning to get more confident. Who knows, the playoffs might come up. Go back a few years, it was the top 2. Now they've given you this top 6, and there is this Wembley, there is this, and I think fans, there's that little bit to grab hold of as well. You know, we might see Fulham, we might see West Brom, we might see somebody, the top 2 just disappear. But you've always got this numbers 3, 4, 5, position 6, where if you're in a shout, you could be as low as 15th, and you're still 2 wins away from perhaps getting into the playoffs. So it's nice for fans because, you know, say you're not too far away. Unless you're really struggling at the bottom, you're not too far away from the playoffs. I've always said if you win 3 games on a spin, where does it take you? Well, quite often in this league, unless you're tailed off, you could actually make the playoffs. So until perhaps next March, you know, we're always going to be in with a chance of the playoffs. So it's a good league, but staying in it and being realistic and building is for me.
Henry?
I think I agree with Phil to a certain extent. I think that it's right that we do have that ambition and that we're thinking, okay, well, once we have consolidated our position, which I think, you know, like I said, we've had 3 consecutive finishes in and around mid-table in the Championship and just missing out on the playoffs, you know, by a couple of games for, you know, 2 seasons. I think it's right that we start to look at the types of players and we start building the squad that we're trying to do, because we're never going to unless we get, and I think we do have to get lucky with a couple of players that suddenly either have an absolute worldie of a season or, come good at the right time, like Mason Bennett's that guy. I think Mason Bennett's that wild card. All of a sudden he just goes on a stream of 10 games where he gets 10 goals and he's unplayable, and and that kind of fires us into the playoffs, and then it's a lottery. We know both sides of the playoffs, right? We know the heartbreak and we know the ecstasy of what can happen in that sort of scenario. But I think it's right that we have got those higher ambitions, and I think a lot of people, their criticism I think sometimes comes from a good place, but like you said, Phil, they are potentially overcritical of Gary Rowett, and they probably look at some of the stuff he's done at other football clubs, and they listen to other football fans that talk about Gary Rowett's style of play, etc., and don't maybe look at the bigger picture of the squad that he is building. Because look, let's be frank, we've just started a season and people are already calling for his head, and it's like, okay, so if we get rid of Rowett, the last 2.5 years were a complete waste of time, because a new bloke's going to come in, he's going to want to do his own 3-year plan, so we're going to spend the rest of the season getting rid of players, changing systems, doing this, that and the other. We'll be lucky to stay up, and then we have to start all that stuff again, and we go back to needing a manager more like Neil Harris again. So I think it's really interesting, but I think the other point I always make is if you look at the history of our football club, the last sort of 3 or 4 seasons, rank inside the top 5 or 6 all-time best finishing positions. You've obviously got the 2 years in the top flight. You've got the season we got promoted. After that, right, we finished 3rd in 93. I think we finished 3rd in 2001. And obviously lost to Derby, lost to Birmingham in the playoffs. And then actually our next best, highest championship finish is 8th 2 years ago. So, and it's unprecedented, some of this stuff. I know in the sort of early to mid 90s we finished 8th, didn't we? And we just missed out on the playoffs, and we did those. But in the history of the football club, we're talking about something like the top 10 best seasons, and we've seen 3 of them in the last 5 years. So it's important to put that in its historical context, and for people to just remember that actually we're all sort of in unprecedented times, and that that's it. So we've got to, it's really important that we keep that high expectation, but that we also do reflect and say, actually, in the history of the football club, we're in the top 10% of what we've ever done, and recognise that, and think about how we can build on it. But like you said, Gary, we're not going to get that 20-goal striker. We're not going to sign a proven 20-goal striker. It ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen anymore.
No.
So unless we get lucky with somebody like Mason Bennett this season, not being funny, 2 goals in 4 games, I'll take that all day long, because that means that if you average that out over a season, he's going to get you 20 goals. So keep going,
You're saying about Mason Bennett there, Phil and Henry, his misdemeanour, let's just call it that, could be our could be our bonus, for want of a better way of putting it. It is because he would still be at Derby, still be one of their main men. I know a Derby fan very well, and he was loved at the club, absolutely loved at the club. Obviously made his mistake with the guys, and his mistake has turned out to be our benefit, really. And he could be that starlet in this team when he gets himself fit again, that can fill that gap. I want to say as well, Henry, I didn't know that, what you just said. They were our top finishes in the last 3 seasons, and that's what a lot of people don't realise. Yeah. They only see the Premiership. Oh, we've got to get there. And I'm going to ask the question, I'm going to put it out there in a minute. Yeah. Would the Premiership be a good thing for Millwall? Do we want to be a parachute team? No. Do you know what will happen? We get promoted, and that'll be the season they get rid of the parachute team. So we'd have that with no money, and everyone else would still have the money from the season before. That would be our luck. But to be honest, here's a question then: is the parachute payments ruining the Championship? Because teams are coming up, likes of Coventry last season. Well done to them; they did well. But you've got the likes of Luton and all other teams like that coming in, and they're surviving, but they're struggling. They're not, unless they're going to get a multi-million-pound backer in the background to come and help them. It's going to be a tough. It's going to be a tough gig.
Gaz, I would just say one thing on that. Are they fair? And I think they I mean, they've wanted to sort of protect them ever since, like people like Portsmouth and that just dropped straight through, right, and went down and down and down or whatever. The issue now is that every other football club last year, and Gary Rowett said this in a press conference, he said it in the fans forum. Every other club last year in the Championship made a complete massive loss, and no one's got any money to spend on any transfers except for the 3 teams coming down with those parachute payments.
There you go.
And so I think the issue that we've got now is that it's like all things. That social disadvantage that we are at comes at the expense of COVID, right? And COVID's affected every team across the country. Financially, it's going to affect us way more than it's going to affect those clubs that have come down with those parachute payments. And you could see it. Look at West Brom. I mean, it really is now princes and paupers, in my opinion. Phil, what do you think?
Depending on who you listen to, and I try to keep it pretty much balanced. John Berylson's put in anywhere between, depending on who you listen to, 40 million and 60 million in the last 10. Well, Fulham got that for being relegated, 40 million.
Exactly.
That keeps Mitrovic. There's your 20 goals a year. That gives them a starting point. That gives them a top quality striker to build the rest of the team around. It probably keeps those talented midfield players. It probably keeps the best centre back, and it probably keeps the best goalkeeper. And don't kid yourself. Some of these guys, I can remember we lost a guy to Norwich, and again, take it with a pinch of salt. We offered him £12,000 a week. He's gone to Norwich on £40,000 a week. Now that was 2 years ago. So there's a huge disparity between players' wages, what attracts, what you can spend, and the clubs that are coming down have got an almighty advantage by keeping their best Premier League standard players. And also you've got you touched on something there, Henry. How many years have we been in the Championship? This is the fourth.
This is our 5th season, I think.
This is our 5th season. Well, I can't remember the club being in that division for too many years. We were in yo-yoing a little bit. This is a consistent run. We got promoted. Fantastic day at Wembley. This is our 5th season. Well, let's keep that. Make that the priority. And I think sometimes you get carried away. We talked about the Premiership. Break it down, as most sportsmen do, into small chunks. Chunk it. We need a good start. We need to get points on the board. We need our first win. We need to be consistent. We need to be picking up points regularly across the year. Now we've got 40 points. Well, relegation, 40 points by Christmas, January, looking like we'll be okay. Can we get 50 points? We're definitely okay. We need a bit of luck. We don't need somebody being sent off and banned for 3 games. We don't need our best player, Hutch or Jed, being injured for 2 months.
Yeah.
So we need a player or two to score and have a blinding season where he gets 15, 20 goals, or Bart keeps 20 clean sheets instead of 17. All of that adds up to a great season, and then you start going from 40 points, 50 points, right, we're in the league again, 60 points, blooming hell, we've still got 10 games to go, can we get into the playoffs? But it's chunking it. Now we need the first win. And what you'll find is, as well, you start, the crowds go up. I mean, I played at Millwall at a Den, there was 4,000. I played in a Youth Cup final where there was 10,000 a day before. We've been at the new Den with half of what we're getting now, and now we sort of, what was it, averaging about 13 and a half, 14,000.
Yes.
Apart from probably the 60s, I can't remember averaging 13,000 at Millwall. So they're doing something right. The fans are paying. They're coming in. We're in the Championship. It's an attractive league. It's not a bad stadium. The surface is just, it was a bowling green for the Blackburn game. There's been investment in the pitch. There's been investment. There could still be more investment if you want to be brutal and find the areas to improve. But I just think, what do we need to do? More pace at the back, a stronger squad, 20 goals a year, Mitrovic. It all costs money. Have we got that money? I don't know.
No.
I don't know. I'm thankful for John Belson. I'm thankful for every fan that's put money into the club through season tickets and buying a beer or however you go, buying a shirt. It adds up, but I don't think you can compete with some clubs. How do they get around the financial fair play at the likes of Bournemouth? Or I have no idea how the accountants work these things, but you just hope that it's not a Bolton or a Bury.
It's a very good point, actually. Someone like Bournemouth, where you think that they get 9,000 or 10,000 in attendance every week, because that's what Dean Court holds, or whatever it's called now, the Vitality Brett Bite Stadium Gatorade, sponsored by whatever it's called. I call it Dean Court. Before they changed the pitch, that's a really interesting point. I don't know, and I know that we just don't even play that game. And I'm so thankful for John Belson and that steady hand, because I wouldn't want to be a Derby or Sheffield Wednesday or a Nottingham Forest or any of these other clubs that have that looming over them. Do you know what I mean?
You wouldn't be talking about winning and losing a game on a pitch. You'll be talking about losing your club. You'll be talking about automatic relegation. You'll be talking about Bury going out of the Football League. You'll be talking about a Bolton, Sheffield Wednesday, 12 points to go. That's what you'll be talking about. You won't be discussing on Facebook about, Bart ain't coming off his line. You'll be talking about the demise of your club, because if you overspend, you get bit on the bum.
And people, I think some people forget that we went into administration back in the late 90s. I still remember that line Roars with the black cover. I don't know if you remember, like Millwall's Darkest Day. I'll never forget that as a young man looking at that. I said this, Phil, to you before we started. The pitch invasion against Bristol City. Where's the money gone in the car park afterwards? Peter Mead coming out, talking to people. We've been through crisis, and I think some of the, maybe some of the younger generation, some of those people weren't following the club back then. But it was dire.
Yep.
Like losing at home to Stockport County 4-3. It was dire.
There's an awful lot goes into running a football club. The fans want to see 3 points on a Saturday and they want to see 3 points away from home. But there's an awful lot of things that go on between the chairman investing what he's allowed to, the gate receipts, season tickets, sales of the lounge, the Billy Neal suite, 3-course meals, tours of the stadium, the boxes being sold out, shirts, or the club shop. There's a whole industry that goes into a club, and when all of it is functioning, it tends to influence the spend on the pitch as well. I would love to be down there every single game. I'm more than happy to give my ticket money in, because I know it's going into the club, and then you trust that the chairman and the owners are spending it wisely. For me, some clubs have not. You can't go and buy a player for, in this league, £50,000 a week, and you're not earning that for at all. It's false economy, and in the end, you get found out. I'm staggered that they're looking at £100 million players. It weren't a year ago. They're moaning about COVID, and now we've got no money, and we're having to furlough everybody. These clubs have still got £100 million. In some cases, £200 million to buy 2 or 3 players. I'm absolutely gobsmacked at the spending power in the Premier League. There's some clubs in the Championship are doing it. Yes, the parachute payments help the likes of Fulham, but there are some clubs where they're heavily reliant on a backer because they haven't got the gate money and haven't got that income. I'd like to think that Millwall's in a better position than that, and it's on concrete, not sand. That's for sure.
Yeah, I can only agree. But talking about the Premiership, would us going into the Premiership be a good idea? I know everyone wants us there, but would we get more points than the infamous Derby? You know what I mean? It's the £100 million game. £100 million, as you just said, that's one player. If you want to be Man City or Man Tottenham, and I'm hearing like this week that Harry Kane is now staying at Tottenham. But to be honest, it's ridiculous. Would we even be able to compete?
No, I mean, I'll just sorry, Phil. The one thing I'd say, Gaz, is I'd put all of that to one side for one season.
Oh, I agree.
Sorry, we've got Arsenal away, Tottenham away, the Hamsters away, Old Trafford, Anfield. I say the empty had. I mean, whatever. Man City Main Road was always the ground for me, and I've been there, so whatever. But can you imagine just for the London derbies? I'd want us to go up for a season.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. And you've hit a nail on the head there, actually, by saying one thing there. And I think Phil was talking about it with our attendances. We're on 14,000 stand at the moment. There's still fans saying, there should be more in the ground. Are these fans that have seen us in the first division, those fans who are moaning about there not being 13, 14, they wouldn't even be putting their money on their season ticket or even going there on a Saturday afternoon if we drop down to Division 1. Yeah. Most of them won't be there because I've been there through thick and thin. As I say, I've sat in Block 15 for the last 20 years in that ground, and I'm sure I've worn my hole in that seat because it's me, that's my seat. I know I sit on the same seat every single week. But and I was at that Leyton Orient game when we lost. Was it 6-2?
Yeah, 5-3 or whatever.
I was at the Rotherham game when we lost 4-0 in the first game of the season. I've been through thick and thin on all those horrible times.
Yeah.
So you start enjoying these seasons now. So yes, I would absolutely love a season in the Premier League, but people have got to get a bit of reality as well, as you're saying. It's crazy.
Gary, I can tell you now that every manager, every player, would bite your right arm off to win the league and get promoted. Yeah. You're a professional sportsman. You're paid to do the sport that you love, and you're paid to train every day, give it 100% every day, put the shirt on, play for the club, win a game, win a league, and get into the Premier League. So that's in a manager's and player's head, that's in an owner's head, that's in the chairman's head. With the Premier League, if you got there, what an experience.
Yeah.
Staying in the league is another matter. Now, so you get relegated, it's £100 million in, and it's £40 million to drop out. That probably sets the club up financially for a decade.
Yeah.
But if you're in the Premier League, you're likely to yo-yo. Norwich, Huddersfield have gone, but it can go. You can be a Watford; they're a bit more solid these days. You can be a Norwich, or you can be a Huddersfield, and everything in between. Until you start getting 35,000, 40,000 crowds, and you start getting probably Middle East backers, and you are paying £100,000 a week to about 20 players, you're probably not likely to stay in the Premier League. But it sets the club up financially. But I'd also say I'd love it if Millwall got to the Premier League. You're watching some of the best players, the best teams, 75,000 at Old Trafford, and there's probably about 5,000 Millwall fans there. They would absolutely love it. Not sure the police would, but what an experience. But I'd also say that the Premier League has got, how can I put this, unique issues.
Yes.
I wouldn't like to watch Millwall lose a game on VAR.
Oh.
I wouldn't like this tippy-tappy football where I'm watching Man City keep possession for 80% of the game and make 2,000 passes. I'll be bored shitless. So there's a bit of me, I don't like the Premier League. There's a bit of me says, well, yeah, wouldn't that be nice? But I'm a professional footballer and I want to get there.
Yeah, but Phil, here's the thing. You're saying about the tippy-tappy football. I watched the Brentford-Arsenal game a couple of weeks ago, and Arsenal did not know, because Brentford went in there playing championship football. In their face, progressive, I'm going to use the word, progressive, in-your-face football, and they did not like it, because they're so used to having half hour on the ball to be able to pass it side to side 1,500 times because no one's going to press them. I feel that is coming into the Premiership a little bit more, but Brentford showed them how it can be done and won the game through doing that.
Yeah, I'll get that, Gary, because I'll liken that again. I mentioned it earlier about experience. 88, 89, Millwall took the first division by storm by playing their brand. And centre-backs in that division, be it Liverpool, Man United, they could not handle Cass and Teddy. They could not handle the two wingers. They did in the second year. They worked out how to beat Millwall. As I said earlier, they spend millions of pounds on working out the opposition and how to beat them. So how long will Brentford last getting in their face? I think with the new rules and referees, there's a bit more black coming into the league, into that top division. There's a few more challenges. There's less protection for the talented players. There might be a few more tackles coming in. There might be a few talented players start getting rid of the ball a little bit quicker. Will that change and benefit the likes of Brentford? Possibly. Will it make the game better? Well, talking to a dog like me that earned a living out of kicking people, I quite look forward to it this year. So, I think Brentford may well do okay with their style of football. They'll certainly work hard and they'll certainly give their fans a shift every game, and who knows, they might stay in it. But there's an awful lot of top quality in that division. And if you saw the first 20-30 minutes Fulham versus Millwall, that's what the Man Cities could do to Brentford for the whole 90 minutes. There's a quality and a pace. You've only got to look at them try. I went over to Arsenal. My son was at Colchester United as a pro. And the under 23s go over and play and look at Arsenal's players. They're on a different page. Under 23s, they keep the ball for fun, and it's 100 miles an hour. You can't get near them. There is a real pace, quality. The first touch, they don't miscontrol the ball. They know how to unpick defences. The movement off the ball is outrageous. So I'm not sure how Brentford are going to deal with it. I hope they do really well, as Bournemouth did, as Sean Dyche is doing at Burnley. They've got a unique way of playing. It upsets teams. It's difficult. I think that's what makes the league so interesting, is different styles. But there are elements of it like I don't get VAR. I don't get the standard of referees. I don't get the tippy-tappy football. Why people can't make a forward pass when it's on is beyond me. I think it must be data and stats. I think they're being rewarded. There must be a bonus for passing or something. I don't know. But there's elements to the Premier League I don't like. But what an experience if Millwall actually got promoted into it. It would set the club up, that's for sure. It put them on the map. Might increase the fan base as well. Those people might come and stay instead of, as you say, fair weather. They join for a year and then disappear when it's the likes of Rochdale. But it's a massive experience. But unfortunately, I think money at the moment in football and other sports as well, it's the root cause of evils. If you get it right, you're at the top of the Premier League. If you get it wrong, you're out of the game and you're gone bust. So I look at even non-league. The money's at the top of non-league as well. The money's at the top of every single division. I follow some clubs. I live near Colchester's ground. They haven't got any money. Nearly went out of the league last year. Southend went out of the league. Wrexham just had some investment from the two actors from America. I've got good mates up there and people I've known for years, and there's an investment there. The expectations are shot up in Wrexham, but the money is, you can have level 4, level 5 of non-league. Whoever's got the money wins the league, But to get into the Premier League is probably the ambition of every single manager and player.
But you're talking about that, Phil. Well, if you go back, what was it? I think it was about mid-90s when Man City got relegated. They dropped down from Premiership down to Championship and then to Division 1. If they don't beat Gillingham of all teams in the playoff final,
and they're 2-0 down, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a different story completely.
Yeah,
maybe
that's the element of luck I was talking about.
Gillingham could have been that team that those Dubai investors put their money into.
Yeah, that's right.
That's how different it could be. Could have been. And Man City could be now a lowly team sitting in. And talking of teams on the luck, we played Bradford 4 5 years ago. They're now sitting mid-table in Division 2, and they could have been where we are, and we could have been there. It's that. And you look at, and you're saying about VAR, Phil. Would that goal have stood under last year's?
No.
This year, no. This year it would have been a goal. Last year, no. Yeah. So that's the difference.
That's what makes football. The debate rages around football, be it referees' decisions, handball, penalties, VAR, is he offside, is his armpit. I saw Manchester City play at Layer Road in what is the Tier 3, Division 1 now. They had a bit of luck. You've also got the finances, the money, the investment has come into Manchester City. The investment has come into Wrexham. John Berylson's looked after Millwall. So there's an element of money, there's an element of luck. I just think when it all aligns, you have a great club and you have a great run. And it's Bradford. They just couldn't sustain it. Southend were at the top end at one stage. They're in the National League, but I think you also have to be realistic and say, if you follow a football club, don't expect success, because there's only one team can win a league and a couple get promoted out of the whole 26 in the league. But you ride a roller coaster of emotion with clubs, and Millwall probably more than most. We're up 1 minute, we're down. There's a pitch invasion. There's somebody booing taking of a knee. I mean, it's just I actually love it, but it's what being a supporter's about. Having a debate, not agreeing with your mate. I have fearful rows with my brother. You know, not Nick, my other brother. He's over here wide, and I'm complete opposite on an opinion on a player or a game. And I just think it's what makes football so great. In fact, all sport, you debate it long and hard. Everybody will have an opinion. You'll see something that somebody else won't. But I just think that the Premier League is a complete and utterly different experience. It's on a different par.
Brilliant. Right, guys, we could go on and talk for hours, but we're going to take a break there.
Hello, my name's Barry Stradling. I'm a Millwall fan my entire life. I'm doing the London Memory Walk to try and raise some money for the Alzheimer's Society. I'm doing this because I've got close friends with Alzheimer's and I've got a family relation with Alzheimer's. So if you could help me out by going to justgiving.com, fundraising Barry Stradling, and try and raise as much money as possible. If you can donate some money and also share the link to people to try and get everyone involved in this to try and help people suffer from Alzheimer's.
Welcome back. Don't forget Danielle and James, who are raising money for Eleanor, which is a specialist palliative care provider for adults and children in Dartford, Gravesham and Swanley, and children across West Kent and London Borough of Bexley. They have an inpatient and outpatient and living services at Northfleet, comprehensive hospice at home services, and a range of outpatient and community services, all supported and delivered through a multidisciplinary team with whom the late Jordan Dawes and her family received tremendous support. Help them in the memory of Jordan if you can.
And don't forget Fan Hub, guys. It allows you to represent your club, prove your loyalty, get recognised by travelling to games, keeping up with the latest fan content, proving your knowledge and building your fan rating. Your fan rating will see you climb the leaderboard, become top fan of your club, earn recognition, reward and the like that your loyalty basically deserves. The app is available on iOS and Android. Fan Hub is a must-have app for all football fans. Be sure to get signed up early and be among the first to earn rewards. Visit Fan Hub on Facebook, Twitter for further details.
And from me, don't forget the Lions Food Hub is now beside the Ballina Road car park entrance to the Millwall Community Trust, about 50 metres down from the club shop. The team at the Food Hub will accept donations of food and money on match days before our home games. If you have any queries about Millwall Football Club matters that you are unable to resolve amongst your friends, please contact Shona Groves by email at slo@millwallplc.com. Shona is always happy to help, and I recommend that Food Hub.
Great, thanks guys. Lastly, we'll be back in a month's time with another Millwall No One Likes Us Talking monthly podcast. Until then, thanks Phil, it's been brilliant. Henry, it's been amazing, and I have really, really enjoyed that. And see you all in a month's time, guys. Bye for now.
Thanks Gary, thanks Henry, bye for now.
Cheers guys, bye.
Bye.
Not everybody likes them, but they don't care.